So I know you have all read the book, Winnie and Claire. Now, chapter 1 was about resistance. I love this book very much. And I have a friend and she's on the call and she's called Brenda. Brenda, you received this book as a gift from Claire in one of the very first puzzles would have, and then she actually got the book as a gift from Claire. Claire had like 3 copies which she gave out. Yeah, so by the time I kept asking for a copy, they were all gone, but all the same, Claire, I have read the book and I'm excited. So Brenda, you're welcome, and everybody else on the call, Susan, now I'm going to participate. You're not have a discussion today. Instead of just one, everyone speaking to different bits of it, we are all just going to have a discussion. So the first session, section chapter 1 was about resistance, and what I liked about chapter was basically being able to identify, try to ask us to be able to identify those things that are causing resistance in our lives. And he starts with a very interesting example, and that's the reason why I do not want to discuss this thing alone. Snoozing my alarm. I don't know who, if you're the person on the chat and if you're a person here who has never snoozed an alarm, please, like, there is no one. So you press snooze and then you roll over. It has happened to me so many times, and then it's just the first battle of the day, like he says it. And so we find that we are struggling with so many things. But I like this book for one thing. I didn't feel judged. I felt like, you know what, it was all about me finding my awareness, me finding the point at which do I understand what are those things that are creating resistance in my life, and being able to identify them. So Claire and Winnie, we need those ideas you have of things you've seen that cause resistance in our lives. That what are those examples? Before we even go into tackling them and saying, okay, this is how we are going to work around them, let's now first talk about what those things are. I'm going to give you, I'm going to go first to Claire and then to Winnie.
Thank you, Primera. Thank you for a nice preamble. Maybe before I say some of those things, personally, this book has, it's a style of writing for me. It's like no other, you know, it's just like that friend who is bold enough to tell you things you don't want to hear. That's what I felt when I was reading this book. And I had many aha moments in there. Now, one of the things that personally keeps me down is seeking for approval for almost everything. If I'm to apply for a job, I need to ask different people, is it right for me? Should I do it? Is it time to do this? So seeking that approval keeps me from going for these opportunities, and makes me second guess myself, you know, because I need Primera to approve. I need someone to approve of my next step. And that's one of my issues. And the alarm clock, the alarm clock, every single time I have to press the alarm clock and pause. And, you know, I think it's procrastination for me. Procrastination. I keep putting things off. I know I'm supposed to do things right now, but I put them off. And then you find that even at work, sometimes you have projects that were given to you in different times. Then you find that you have like 6 deadlines in the same week. And it's not that the boss is unreasonable. They actually gave me these things in time, but I keep, you know, pushing them until the deadline, and I find myself overwhelmed. So that for me is really, really my alarm clock. Thank you, Primera.
You're muted.
Primera, mute.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Now over to Winnie.
Yeah.
You can give a preview of the book and what you feel about the book in general, and then you can talk about things about resistance in general.
Yeah. For me, the most powerful thing about this book is what Matthew refers to as giving that thing a name. Yeah. So the fact that he gave it a name and called it resisting happiness. So for me now, whenever I try to push off something, and my biggest issue has also been procrastination, maybe like also Claire says, that has been a big thing for me, yeah? Where you feel maybe I should start doing this now, and then you say, no, maybe I'll start tomorrow. Or it's too big, this is not the time. So the fact that he gave that thing a name, we've always known it, procrastination, but now he calls it resisting happiness. And for me, that name actually defines it, because you see your happiness deteriorate just because you have pushed off things, yeah? And when you come to handling that thing, you're panicky, you're sad, even at home, you cannot talk to anybody because this thing is on your head. So that name he gave it, resisting happiness. I now remind myself whenever I'm tempted to procrastinate that you are resisting happiness. And for me, that is the game changer here. Procrastination has been my thing. Now I call it resisting happiness, and it gives me that wake up call of do it now or you're going to be sad. So that's the thing for me, really.
That's so true. I love that. I really, really love that. I also feel the same after reading this book. He talks about laziness. Let me see. He talks about laziness. He talks about procrastination. He talks about self-loathing. I think that thing is for real. Indecision, tension, self-sabotage. Basically, we know things, and then now it takes us now to chapter 2 nicely. So chapter 1, he concludes and tells us resistance stands between us and happiness, which is very true. Then he gives us an exercise to do. I don't know if you guys did it, to write down every time you encounter resistance through your week. You just write those things and see what they are, which was quite interesting. Now that brings us to chapter 2, where he talks about the quest for happiness. And he talks about, we actually know those things that are actually going to affect our happiness, but all the same, we try to do them. So I want you to speak about how those things that you talked about, like your things you may have noticed in other people, like self-loathing, or what Claire has talked about, how those things have affected our lives in terms of our quest for happiness, like in real life examples around you. Yeah. We can start with Winnie.
Start with Claire.
Yeah, start with Claire.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. For me, it's really from from chapter 2, I get to see that I have the power. Sometimes we think that happiness has to come from our circumstances, from if my luck changes, if this changes outside myself, then I will be happy. But chapter 2 really emphasizes that even we should spend more time enjoying the present things, looking for the happiness. We need to look out for it on a daily. We need to pursue. For example, there's a lot that we are dealing with in terms of mental health. Yeah, mental health. If it's a bad relationship, it's in your power to make the decision to change your circumstance, because we are meant to be happy. We are meant to be happy. Not, of course, you can't be on a high every day, because life can't give you a high every day. But that joy, for me, behind the phrase happiness, I see joy. I see joy, and joy is not dependent on outside circumstances. It's a personal decision. I choose today that I will make myself happy. And when I tried to do that exercise, I found that it's a small, tiny, irritating things that change the trajectory of my day. For example, in the morning, I can be very like I'm going to have a happy day. I send out my quotes, I'm encouraging everyone. And then the first phone call you get in office, you're like really, really disorganized, and the whole day goes down. So for me, it's the small things. I have to be, to make a decision every day that in spite of all these things and the pressures that come, just last week, I was just heading to work, and my house help was like, I need to go early morning. And I'm like, you need to go where? And she's like, I need to go. I'm going to Oman. I'm like, you're going to what? I'm going to Oman. I've been going for an LC letter, and the whole day just went south, just by that one incident, So I made a few phone calls, I canceled a few meetings, but I was like, you know what? Claire, calm down, take control of your mind, of your circumstance. Yes, the house helper said she's going to leave. It's not the end of the world, So those tiny, tiny things that happen every day, I've realized I need to be very protective of my joy and my happiness. And I also need to do the things that I enjoy. Sometimes, like when I'm talking to different people, you find that people have given up on joy. They've given up on happiness. Yeah, they don't voice it, but you find that someone is constantly in that phase of complaining, of always thinking of the negative, of lack, and that's where your mind goes. From this book, I realized that I have the control. I have the control of what happens, and I need to daily look out for those things that block my happiness. Thank you, Primera.
Thank you so much. Winnie, did you give yourself a rating? He asked us to give ourselves a rating of happiness in the last 3 months. Without thinking about today, he asked us to give ourselves a rating. And then also, I want you to give us examples of around yourself. So he talks about how we see them in other people more than we see them in ourselves. We see people around ourselves being self-loathing themselves and turning themselves from people who are actually beautiful. They become different. What are your experiences in terms of people resisting happiness in this context?
Well, in this second chapter, he discusses the value of sitting down for a few minutes of prayer and reflection, yeah? And he confirms that actually brought him a lot of happiness, clarity, and focus. So on my part, I have found some magic in those few minutes of quietness. So I always remind myself that I need those few minutes of quiet time. Where I resist happiness is when I fail to wake up early enough. And so by the time I want to do my quiet time, everybody has woken up and they're calling, mommy, mommy, blah, 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 blah. So those times I see that I have really resisted happiness and I have missed those few minutes. But when I'm strong enough to wake up and do my quiet time, for me, it's a game changer. It puts me in a different perspective. You can actually do anything and I'll be okay. I tried to tell my sister about it and my brother, and I was telling them, you people, there is value in this thing called quiet time. They actually laugh at me and begin to tease me with the whole trying to be quiet and do that quiet time and sort of meditation. But for me, my magic lies in those few moments. So if I feel like I'm panicky, I'm starting the day off on a wrong note, for me, that's what I do. I just stop and make sure I do those few minutes of quiet time. So that's for me what I would tell anybody if I see a friend who is panicky or in that mode. I just try to share that message of, do you do quiet time? And many people don't get it unless you have tried it. But it's one thing I would like to spread and shout out over the top of the trees that everybody needs that first thing in the morning. Quiet time.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go to chapter 3, where he talks about making sense of everything. And the one part I picked about that whole thing is about chapter 3, about making sense of everything, is the point you've said about being able to have that alone time. It's extremely important. And then he goes on to say there is nothing in this world that can fill a certain hole we have. He called it God-sized hole, that you can put there anything: power, money, alcohol, experiences, accomplishments. You have everything of the very best in the world. Even if you won a Pulitzer Award or a Grammy, it's the same thing. Even if you won a Nobel Peace Prize, it's the same thing. There's only a hole that it keeps empty because only God can really fill it. So like I said earlier in this book, I love the reality that it gave me, and also the way he wrote the book. I agree with Claire. The writing of the book is really great, and in such a way that as much as he's telling you the truth, there is no judgment. Like basically, this is the new way in which you can do things. So he also talks about us mistaking certain people or things that are going to fill our lives. How many times have I felt like maybe when I was younger that a boyfriend or a husband should fill in certain holes, or you feel like maybe a girlfriend should fill in those holes, or you feel like your job should fill in such certain holes, or your children. But as much as they are there, they are not able to fulfill those deepest longings that you have. That was my best learning from this book. So he goes on to say that our desire for God is written in our lives, so deep in our hearts, it cannot be erased. And you're created by God for God, and God never ceases to draw us to him. And that was really, really nice for me. Okay, it's a very nice reminder, especially now. We've been through COVID. We've stayed home a lot with our better halves, our family, our kids. And sometimes I know we have lost ourselves in the maze of it all, having to live with the same people, the same space. You didn't have the workspace that you had to go to before. But now, about finding the truth and happiness you're looking for is only in God. That was really important for me to hear again. I don't know about you, but for me it was. And then he talks about the whole meaning of and purpose of our existence is wrapped up in God. And the moment we separate ourselves from God, it loses meaning. We start trying to fill those holes using our spouses, our children, our jobs, our businesses, and then it just all doesn't go well. Anything else from your side, Claire, on this chapter? It was really about placing God at the center of everything.
Thanks, Primera. I think for me, that particular chapter made the most sense, because all of us, like we'll later see, all of us, every time you wake up, whether you want it or not, whether you stay in bed or go to work, we are all chasing something. We are all seeking something. And there are many things that we think can fill our void. One of the, I think the lies that for so long I bought into was money, that money can actually fill that void. If I have enough money, if I have a better job, then really, really, if you have money, what other problem do you have? And then I realized that that is not the case. It's not the case. And many of us actually go through life thinking that if I make more, if I earn more, if I'm given more, I will actually get more money. But one of the challenges that we've had, of course, with our book club is trying to separate God and the book club, you know? And you're like, do I mention God? Do I mention God? Do I, you know, what are the limitations? And then you realize that throughout all the books that we have read, all the advice, all the self-help books, it comes back to that. It comes back to that inherent desire that we are given to look up to God in everything, you know? We need to realize that. And one of the things that COVID-19 has taught me is the fact that even with all the intelligence, even with the knowledge that we have acquired as human beings and the technological advancement, COVID-19 humbled every single person to the point that you have to say, God, help us. There's nothing more we can actually do. And last week I was hearing one of the I think it's BBC, and she was reporting about the new cases of COVID-19. And even without intending to say God, you know, sometimes they beep. When you mention God, they keep beeping and closing that out. But she said, I hope they don't mute the fact that we all need God, you know, as in she just put it out there. So that reminded me that, oh my God, unless we turn to God as a country, as an individual, there's nothing else that can fill this void that we have. And so this chapter rings true for me, that even with all the things that we are going through in our lives, all the achievements, all the things that we acquire, you know, nothing makes sense if you've been owned this entire world and then you lose your soul. So it doesn't matter what kind of religion or belief that you have, we still need to recognize that we did not end up here by accident. You know, that's where wisdom begins. Once we do not accept that, then we may seek for fulfillment in alcohol, like Primera said, in money, in relationships. Sometimes we think, if only I did not end up with this man, I think I will have another a better life, you know. And that consumes you every single day. It's like, if I was married to someone else, if I was married, or if I had a job in the UN. If I had a job in the UN, surely that's where joy begins. My children are taken care of. But you get a job in UN and you don't have your health, you know, and you don't have a relationship with your family or with God. So that chapter for me, and I've read this book 3 times. So that chapter for me, and that's why I give every single time I get a copy, I don't stay with a copy. Right now, I don't even have a copy of a physical copy, because I keep giving it out. I keep giving it out because it really, really, really summarizes what we need to know in our lives. Thank you, Primera.
Okay, thank you so much, Claire, for that. I will move to chapter 4 with Winnie. And chapter 4 starts with saying that resisting happiness, when we resist happiness, we resist God. Like automatically we resist happiness, we resist God. And then there's an interesting conversation. Yes, Winnie. There's an interesting conversation he brings up about sometimes we want something for someone so bad more than they can actually see it for themselves. It has happened to me earlier this year. And you have a situation where someone is throwing themselves, like they're headed straight for a ditch, and you know that, and you try to help them, try to see the right thing to do, but they just won't see it. You know, like you just see that everyone can. Sometimes it has happened to us so many times, especially if you've been in a leadership position where you have employees, you have a lot of experience, like you've been doing something for the last 20 years, last 15 years. Trust me, when I bring you a scenario, you will immediately know that this is wrong or it's going to lead me in the right path. When we have our own children, I have a 9-year-old, he's almost 10, and we're in that preteen age, and sometimes you're at work and they call you, he did something, and you're like, oh my God, like what next? And things like that. And even as they grow older, let's say when it comes to choosing careers, when it comes to choosing schools, there are certain things we want for our children, but it doesn't always work out. So that's the example he brings out here. And then he brings God into it. So Winnie, tell us the God position for our lives according to this chapter.
Yeah, first I had my hand up for the previous one. I want to share something.
All right.
I knew as a very young child, and I thought it had affected many things in my life, but this book just confirms that that's the way life is. So when I was young, my mom gave me something about St. Francis of Assisi, where he said, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. Mm-hmm. So for me, that thing has resounded. You can tell me about the most marvelous achievements you have got, and it will still ring back in my head, and I'll say, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. So for me, whatever I see you sharing and your achievements, I just pray in my heart that everybody will realize the hand of God in what they have achieved. Because I know that for sure that our hearts are restless until they rest in God. So some people may want me to be excited, but if I don't see God in your celebration, it just comes to me, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. And sometimes it's annoying that I'm not as excited as you are, because I feel that you should recognize the hand of God in what you have achieved. But I think it still relates to the chapter you're talking about, Primera, and how we see that in other people's lives. For me, that's really the main concern, that do you realize the hand of God in whatever your achievement is? And I was one of those people who are a bit uncomfortable with this book and asking my fellow reviewers that, do we really want to talk about God this much? And yet I know for sure that he's a big part of everything. So I just hope that the people that we are discussing with today have and share the same belief. Yes, Primera. Over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Winnie. I just wanted to speak into one more thing. You have talked about that, but then there's about being the best version of ourselves, but resisting our true selves. The key point here is when we resist God, we resist happiness. Thank you. So there is an assignment at the end. We need to recognize when you want something for others more than they want it for themselves. Are we able to do that? You know, and that is how God feels about us, that he wants to give us so much more than we think that we want for ourselves, that it's just the same. He tries to give that likeness. You have children, you want the very best for them. You want them to have good grades. You have even sometimes much more than they don't even know, but God wants the same for us. So like chapter 5, talks about life is messy. And in this chapter, he's really talking about the same things, about life not going the way we want it to go. We are not able to, we are not able to get the life that we want exactly like we want it, but God is always there for us. So everyone that we are meeting today is all carrying a certain hard battle and carrying a very heavy load. So how do we engage with such people? Life is messy for all of us. It's not what we think it would be. We know we need to resist happiness. We know we are resisting happiness. We know we need to have God in the middle of our lives, but sometimes life does not go the way we want it to go.
Yeah.
So, like, give us examples of parts of life that you found messy, not necessarily in your own life. You've been able to mentor, you've been able to go into certain communities and environments where you have actually seen people resist happiness in a very messy situation. And how to be able to take simple steps to improve those messes.
Okay. I want to just read the quote in this text. Life is messy, and it's not enough just to talk about the mess. We are each called to do something about it. So for me, reading that reminds me of a greater calling that we have. All of us are dealing with stuff. Even on this call, we are all dealing with stuff now. And the challenge with a corporate space is you have to keep faith. You have to project that you're okay to the outside world. Everyone has to see that Claire is okay. And many times you're not okay. I just want to give my experience, something that happened to me in the lockdown. I had a hormonal reaction to my skin, and no one knew about the problem, but it was terrible. There was no single part of my skin that did not have acne. And having had a perfect skin before, to get to a point where it's just a horror, and no one knew about that struggle, you know. So I was doing my book reviews, I was doing everything, going on with work, but because we were working offsite, it wasn't so pronounced. But one of the ladies in Girls for Girls was like, Claire, are you really, really okay? Because I sense something is off. And I shared my photos, and she could not believe. It became a personal problem for her. She said, Claire, there is no way I can sleep and let you go through this alone. And so she talked to dermatologists, she talked to different people abroad, she suggested things. And one of those contacts, one of the dermatologists she recommended, actually helped me, was able to find the problem, and we started the journey to clearing my skin. Why am I sharing this? It's not enough for us to know that someone is struggling. What can I do in my power to make a difference? Even just listening, you know, even listening and talking. For me at that time, all I needed was not a sermon of joy and inward beauty. I just needed the acne to go. And in that particular time, she was able to provide the contact to a dermatologist who was able to sort my problem. So for me, this passage also showed that before Winnie is an expert in STEM, before I'm an expert in business development, I'm Claire. There is Winnie, there is Primera. These people are humans going through life. Their daughters, their wives, their sisters before their bosses, before all these other earthly and carnal things that we wear every day. We are human beings. And so in that mess called life, let us find ways of building one another up. Call someone. If I achieve something from, one of the things that I've learned from this book club is there are people I have never met physically who pick up the phone and call me almost an entire week. And I'm like, oh my God, because if I don't write down something, I don't remember it. But someone remembers and say, Claire, thank you for the book club. Claire, you said this and it changed my life. And I'm like, it's because I just put it out there. I just put it out there. So it's just an encouragement for us to recognize that we are all on a journey. But with all the mess, we should remember that quote. We are each called to do something about the mess. Thank you. Winnie?
Okay, thank you, Claire. Personally, I struggle with this area, and reading the book, the writer shared an example of when we were going through our messes, Jesus left his Father's throne and came down. He came down to be with us in our mess. So it's a reminder that you have to be with those people through their transgressions, to be a part of them. But I know where my struggle comes from. I was orphaned at a very early age. Yeah. By 10 years, my dad had died. By 16, my mom was dead. So I lost my parents very early on in life. So I got a sort of hardness and belief that the world is full of hills and valleys. So I just know that when you're in a valley, you're going to come out. There is a hill coming somewhere. It won't be forever. So for me, this section just reminds me to try and cry with those who cry. Otherwise, my natural self is to say, it won't be for long. Don't worry. You'll be out of it. Tomorrow the sun will shine. So that's my place. But I just need to learn. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Winnie, for that. I love that topic very much, that chapter and topic, because it was about being able to be, I call it emotional intelligence, having emotional intelligence to be able to at least go through life. And the people you cross paths with, you are, you have that, you're able to extend the grace to those people and be able to actually understand them. They could be going through so much and you have no idea. Claire said, we are on here, we're doing calls, but behind there, a lot was going on with Claire at that time. So thank you so much. So off to chapter 6, it's about something is missing, being able to look at ourselves, and sometimes we are not satisfied. I have had that. So you probably have this, I'm going to give an example. You probably have this very nice job, like a CEO, a very manager, large. Inside you, you'd rather be doing something else. And when you tell people, oh, I want to leave my job, they're like, huh? Really? How can you leave such a nice job? But inside you, you feel like you're so restless. You feel like something is not working out, that something is missing in your life. But people outside there are like, what's wrong with you? Literally, if you gave me that job, if you gave me that, if I had that house, if I had that car, I would be so satisfied. But that person isn't. They feel a certain level of dissatisfaction in their own lives. So this chapter is all about, please don't lie to yourself about, if you're not satisfied, just be honest with yourself. I find that has been one of the best lessons of my life as I'm growing up. I am not yet grown. There's a lot of learning, but I've learned to be able not to pretend. If you're not well, if you feel dissatisfied, just say, I'm not well. I am not satisfied with what I'm doing. You know what? It leads us to something better. We have had enough stories that start at G4G with this thing of I joined G4G. I am not satisfied with what I'm doing. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be able to do something with my life. And then you just start. Okay. So it's not only about being dissatisfied. It's also now again going to that God feel, that hole created by God that nothing can fill. So about going back to it and then talking to God to be able to find what is that is missing. So you have these amazing people who have left the most amazing jobs because there is no they're dissatisfied, and God is calling you to something different, literally. So you find yourself resigning the role and then moving on to something better. But how does it feel later on? Because now this is what God and where God wants you to be. So how does it feel?
Premier, I think I missed that. Your internet, is it mine or yours?
It's Primera's.
So I said it's just about listening to God, basically through our dissatisfaction. Sometimes people will not understand you as a person in terms of what you're going through. But where do we go back? We go back again to what we said. We're listening to God through your dissatisfaction to be able to find what is going to make you happy and what makes you satisfied. So in that journey, we are saying that we can't pretend to be happy and satisfied when we are not. It is pointless. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Then I was saying, do you have any examples that have happened to you or you've seen?
Okay. Thanks, Primera. All right, I think Primera network issues. I don't know. Anyway, I can just share what came to mind when I was reading that chapter. Something is missing, something is missing. Sometimes that dissatisfaction, like you said, cannot be explained. You know that there's a question I used to ask myself at one point: is this my lot? I knew there was something more about life than an 8 to 5. There must be something more. And that hunger for something more is something that we all need to find out. And you can only find it in what Winnie shared about that quiet time. These things you cannot find out if something is missing if you don't take time to be alone. In that quietness, that's when you ask, I'm 41. What has been my contribution thus far to this entire world? What has been my contribution? And if you're not satisfied with your contribution for the 41 years that you've been on earth, you need to say, I need to make a decision that will change the rest of my life so that it makes sense. So it's from that dissatisfaction. That's where you get. Primera, kindly read, there's a quote in that particular chapter. I can't find it here. The last quote. Kindly read it.
The one which is in bold?
Yeah, the bold one.
Bold? The bold one, eh? It is okay to be dissatisfied. Being dissatisfied and pretending that we are not is the kind of lie that leads to spiritual and physical illness. Our dissatisfaction is trying to lead us to something better or something different altogether.
True. So there was a time I shared with someone, and they were like, you know, Claire, I think you're very ungrateful. All the things that, you know, how can you be saying something is missing with all the blessings that you have? You have a family, you have this, you have people who love you. And I'm like, there's something more. There's something more. And it's only you who can actually find it. It's only you who can find it, So he says it bluntly, do not lie to yourself. If you're not well, seek help, you know. If you're not well, see a counselor. Sometimes in Uganda, mental health is really, mental health, it's an American problem. Depression? What do you mean you're depressed? With what? You're just being ungrateful. But the issue is that there's that gap. There's something. And that's where God speaks. You know, God can speak to you through that dissatisfaction. And I've seen it in so many ways in my life, that when I get out of my comfort zone, that is when God speaks and uses me. Thank you, Primera.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for that. I will go to number 7, chapter 7. Now, chapter 7 is about the big question, and he talks about, he gives a very interesting story about how he has an interface with John, and then they keep talking, and he's probing him about different things, and then he looks at him and tells him, you don't look happy. And he didn't want to admit that that he was happy. So he tells him he should stop by church for at least 10 minutes every day to school in the morning. So him and his brothers used to walk every day to school in the morning. And so for time and time coming, he tries to be busy and makes himself really busy, until one of those days he tries to walk into church for 10 minutes. And then he finds it's so calming, there's so much clarity. So he began to use the time to plan for his day. And after some time, you know what? It's not enough to plan for my day. Let me just also interface with God in prayer. So it becomes something that he starts going to and doing in his life, you know, like constantly. And he says that really changed his life. Just that amount of time, that 10 minutes to be able to interface with God, to be able to pray, and that constant mental conversation with God was a complete changer for him with God. So that chapter is really interesting for me because it talks about our lives changing because of our habits. If we change and bring new habits in our lives, then our lives will automatically change. And then he focuses on prayer being that one thing that changes everything. And nothing really changes until we have a point of prayer every day in our daily lives. So he asks us to start with 10 minutes and sit in silence and pray and present things you're struggling with to God. Remember, at the center of everything, it has to be God, because he's the only one who can really fill those holes in our lives. I don't know if you have any comments, Winnie, or yeah.
Winnie?
Primera, I think you perfectly put it. It speaks to the same message we discussed earlier. And here he says it is quite simple, really. The moment we open ourselves up to God's plans is the moment miracles begin to happen in our lives. So that's really the conclusion of that chapter, that we need to open up to God and let him give us the answers to whatever we are looking for.
I also want to say something about the issue of habits. Yeah, there's that quote, our lives change when our habits change. New habits bring new life. And I think that's what our book club is all about. When Primera shared a poster of all the books that we have read from the time we started the book club, and it was some overwhelming moment for me to realize that we've gone through all these books It's just those small habits. For example, the habit of reading. Yeah, I know someone on this call who faithfully comes for the book reviews, and she feels she has read, and she feels she has been reading with us because she attends the book reviews. But it's not about a physical book, an audio book, or ebook. It's really about the information that we get. It's about self-development. What knowledge have you acquired from these books? The book, I think it was Present Over Perfect, was life-changing. Even with my reading habits, there are books that pop up for you, and you're like, oh my God, if I hadn't read this book, where would I get this information? We will never meet Matthew. We will never meet him. But we've been able to learn so much. So when we create habits, they change our lives. For example, the 10 minutes that Winnie is talking about, that 10-minute prayer, yeah? If we are making resolutions for 2020, and we're saying, these are my spiritual goals, 10-minute prayer every day, I am very sure life cannot be the same. If prayer has not been in your life and you set out 10 minutes every day just to be in silence and to pray, I think changes lives. So really, if we take away one thing, it's to create new habits in order for us to change our lives. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. I'm going to go to chapter 8, which is about the forewords. Now, this chapter was interesting for me because it took me back to Our Father's Prayer, and the forewords is talking about are in the 5th line of the prayer, and says that will be done. And for me, I think I have a personal story, like for myself, like in my life. I'm a firstborn, and being a firstborn, there is a way you're used to organizing everybody. So you also grow up, you're organizing yourself, you're organizing your life, you're organizing your children, spouse, everybody around you. But then things don't always go according to plan, like literally, like we saw in earlier chapters. And so for me, it has been one of the biggest lessons as I grow up and grow older, about just like let thy will be done, as in thy will be done. That those 4 words, like not being, just letting God do his part in your life, like let him just do things that you even thought cannot ever happen. And with that, the author of the books talks about God calling us to have a very intimate relationship with him. And that intimate relationship cannot be achieved if we are not doing what we've done before, like the 10 minutes in prayer. Then he talks about, and we're just going to read the extract, that we live in a culture that says the meaning of life is to get what we want. And that when we get what we want, then we will be happy. We yearn for happiness because we were created for it. For we fall for the lie. We race off into the world to get what we want. But sooner or later, we all realize that getting what we want doesn't make us happy. Again, back to the first beginning where we started from. Any comments from you?
So for me, this "thy will be done" is an interesting statement, because we had an exchange in another group where the focus then was ask God for whatever you want and consider it done. Have faith that it has been done. So then an exchange started where another person says, no, it's not like that. The Lord's Prayer is it. You have to say thy will be done. When you ask God, do not have faith that it will come. The ultimate is that his will be done. So we had a back and forth about these statements. But ultimately, we concluded that the fact that God's will should be done should not stop you from asking and being specific about about what you want. But ultimately, while you ask, because it says ask and you will receive, at the same time, in the same spirit, you should still believe that he will do what is best for you. So taking these two things together is interesting in the frame of this, thy will be done. Yeah.
All right, and then one of the quotes there is, when was the last time when did you last ask God to advise you about a big decision you had to make? Many times I run for the phone for some of those decisions. I'm like, what do you think? What do you think? But here he takes us back. But you know what? Some of life's big decisions, ask God. Ask, is this really the will of God? And we need to seek to do the will of God, you know? And that is something that Jesus Christ showed us very well in the New Testament. He always said, I've come to do the Father's will. He had clarity on what his mission was. But many times we go through life and we have no clue whether we are in the will of God. We take jobs, you apply for a job, you get it, without even wondering, have I consulted God on this? Or is because I was just looking for the scale, the salary scale, and that's it. You don't ask whether it's in the will of God or not. Same as marriage, because everyone else is getting married, you have to get married. You have to go with this particular person. Have you asked whether it's the will of God? And many times people ask after 2 years, was my marriage in the will of God? Maybe I was outside the will of God. And, so this chapter, the things that happen and you wonder whether you're in the will of God. So we need to really, really deliberately ask God for guidance, and God speaks. God speaks in a number of ways, and one of the ways God speaks is through His Word. It's through the Word of God. If we don't have the quiet time, you never you hear what Winnie thinks, you hear what Primera thinks, but you will not hear what God thinks. And sometimes we consult God after we've made mistakes, and yet you would have consulted God at the beginning, and then God guides you on the right decision. So for me, those 3 words, thy will be done, are hard. They are hard because, like Primera read the culture, that we move out of home every day. We live in a culture of, I have to get what I want. It's a culture that we live with. But he brings us back to the center and says, please ask God first in all the major decisions in your life, whether they are career, whether they are, relationship, marriage, financial, all these decisions, that we make. God can guide us in the different aspects of our lives. Thank you. Primera, are you still on? Primera?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
No.
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you very well. Thank you so much for that. So now, because of time, allow me to summarize number. So in number 10, chapter 10, he talks about it is okay for us to think about death once in a while. It kind of gives us this, it kind of reminds us to be able to get busy living. All right. So he talks about we all born with a death sentence because we all know we are going to die at some point. But we should not let that stop us from living and living. So there are some questions he puts there and some sample questions. I wish I had the courage to be myself. Those are things that people think at the end of their lives. I wish I spent more time with people I love. I wish I had made spirituality more of a priority. I wish I'd spent so much more. I hadn't spent so much time working. That's when we see people leave their nice, cool jobs to do other things, and we're like, why would they do that? But that's not their priority. They decided to go and live really hectic jobs and spend more time with their children, something like that. I wish I had discovered more about my purpose earlier. I wish I had taken more risks. I wish I had cared less about what other people thought of me. I wish I had realized earlier that happiness is a choice. I wish I had loved more. I wish I had taken better care of myself. I wish I had been a better spouse. There are so many things in there that you could read. So it talks about, basically, it is healthy to reflect on that life is short, and we're all going to die, but we should get busy living, not just thinking about not living and doing things that are not relevant. There's a part where he talks about being able to, the chapter before, being able to take the part that Claire you talked about decisions. How often do we go to God for decisions? He'll help us be able to distinguish the necessary and the unnecessary. The unnecessary are things that don't keep us from that keep us from living. Then chapter 11, he talks about planning. It is good to plan, but we need to find God in the now. God lives in the eternal now. He is constantly inviting us to immerse himself in the present moment so we can be with him. If you're like me, who is like the writer and author of this book, we love to plan. We know our lives. You knew there are people who knew I'll finish school at this time, go to uni at this time, finish, get married, you have a plan, or I want to travel, I want to get this cool job. Yeah, there's all that stuff we want to do. But God wants you to be God wants to be aware and be there in the present. It reminds me of the book that you talked about earlier. Because that book, every day when I wake, that actually really, really woke me up. Present over perfect. I have the audio book. I still listen to it, but that book kind of woke me up. And every time I have to go through a day and I have to make a certain decision, I'm like, am I trying to be perfect? Am I being aware of my moment? Am I being present? And being present actually much, much better for me than anything else. So God also wants that for us. So it's a really, really interesting thing that everything has come, every book we have read this year comes back to the same moment that we have been through. Chapter 12 is, there's a quote: when I did something that I knew was God's will, something that would clearly help me become a better version of myself, I was filled with joy. When I did something that I knew was wrong or was clearly not good for me, the joy began to evaporate. Then the other quote is, every moment of every day, every situation, every person we encounter is an opportunity to become a better version of ourselves. Now, so it's about, again, differentiating the things that are helping us, that the things that are going to make us the better versions of ourselves. But we can't get those things if we are not stopping first to be able to understand our environment and being able to ask God what those things are. Yeah, so that is I had to go through that because I see time is not on our side if I continue like on everything. So I can ask someone else to go on chapter 13 and summarize and maybe try to carry on from where I've stopped and then just try to go on.
Winnie, you're still muted.
Thank you, Primera. I like this key point from one of your chapters. God wants to give us present moment awareness. He wants you to be aware of things while they are actually happening. So it coincides with your reference to the present over perfect. And when I read that, you sort of stop. I read it while you were going through the chapter, and I asked if I am aware of this present moment that is happening right now, the fact that we are doing this book review, and it gives you a different feeling, a different appreciation of that very moment. So being aware of this present moment is also a strong aspect of how we live our lives. So I'll pick up from you, Primera. with chapter 13. And in chapter 13, the writer discusses living hour by hour. And in hour by hour, this chapter, he says the primary purpose of our work is to help us become the best version of ourselves. When you work hard, pay attention to the details of your work and do a good job. Yeah. So how many of us dedicate that every hour to doing the best that we can in that moment? In the example he gives, or in the challenge he gives, he says, you can use every hour of what you do as a prayer. For example, sometimes you may not want to say go for a particular meeting, but if you changed perspective and said, I will dedicate this hour of this meeting as a prayer to God, it changes the way you show up in that moment and your whole perspective of that meeting. So he encourages us to live hour by hour. And he says also pray without ceasing. And then he questions, can we actually pray without ceasing? I don't know how many people have heard of that statement, pray without ceasing. It's a common statement, pray without ceasing. But then he says, does it mean that you will spend every moment of your day in prayer? So that's not what it means, but you can make every activity of your day a prayer. And in that way, you are practicing that which is praying without ceasing. So he encourages us to transform every activity in our lives into a prayer. And this way, we become the best version of ourselves. You can offer each hour of your work as a prayer for either a person or an intention. There are unlimited situations that you can pray for. Picking up from your approach, Primera, I don't know if any of you has practiced that, offering the moment every hour as a prayer. Have you had an experience of that, or is it something we are all learning from this book? Primera, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. We can continue.
Claire, do you want to respond?
Yeah, for me, it's my experience of praying at all times is usually in terms of trouble. There is a time I knocked down a traffic officer. If you think you have issues, try to knock down a traffic officer. So they were asking me questions, and we're in the middle of town at the Airtel, I think, roundabout, and there were so many people. I had just knocked a policeman on his bike, and all the border guys and the taxi guys were just waiting to see how this is going to, go. And all I could do was pray. I'm like, God, I don't look good in prison. That color doesn't work well with me. So I was just praying, God, if you can only do this for me, if you can let me survive this, And the policeman kept saying he thinks he has internal bleeding. And I was like, oh my God, I'm dead. This could end up as all those CIA things came to mind. But at that moment, I realized that is the kind of life, that is the kind of life we need to lead. Not only when we're in trouble, when your life depends on it, when the thought of jail brings you down to your knees. So for me, it's hard, And it's hard to pray all the time, but that is ideal. And that's what Paul says in Corinthians, and encourages us to pray all the time. How do we live a life of prayer? And Matthew Perry, in I think it's in one of his other books, talks about praying as a lifestyle. Yeah, I think that's one of the starting points. Let prayer become a lifestyle. If things are going well, prayer is not only about asking. Prayer can be thanksgiving. If we live lives of gratitude, if, for example, I end this call and I'm like, God, I thank you that we're able to spend 2 hours speaking to someone on this call, that is prayer. So what I learned from that particular chapter is let prayer become a lifestyle. Let it become a lifestyle, not only when you knock down a traffic policeman, you know, and and life is about to end. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Claire. Direct quote from the book. It says, as Christians, we are called to transform every activity in our lives into a prayer. This is how we become the best version of ourselves. So that's chapter 13. It's about learning to pray without ceasing, but to transform every activity into a form of prayer. If we don't want an activity, dedicate it as a prayer to somebody, and that will change the way you work. So every activity can be transformed into a prayer. Offer each hour or activity of your day to God as a prayer, and it can be for a specific intention. Yeah. So he also says you can set an alarm to go off each hour. Take a deep breath and lift the coming hour up to God. 10 seconds at the beginning of each hour will change your life if you dedicate that hour. Maybe it's something we can practice and we see how that changes our lives. Chapter 14. In chapter 14, he discusses interesting people. And this is testimony to what Claire has always told us about. He says, if you want to be an interesting person, read books. Yeah. So people who read, he says people who read, he talks about books in general, but at the same time, he comes back to the Bible. He says people who read the Bible regularly make better decisions. The Bible gives us incredible insight into the mind of God. He gave an example of one time he needed to do a training with one of those Fortune 500 companies. So he asked everybody, bring forth your calendar. Let me see what your week is like. So just prior to the training, he says, bring forth your calendars. Let me see what your typical week is like. And he realized that for the CEO, every morning at 7, he had a Bible reading session scheduled. It was scheduled on his calendar to start off his day. So that he found that quite intriguing and asked him, do you actually do that every day? And the CEO went to say that, yes, I do that. As a matter of fact, I do it every day. And so he explained that before he even became CEO, he had been made the head of sales. So he says that when he was made the head of sales, he realized that he could not, there was no way he was going to pull off that job. And that is how he started that routine of daily reading of the Bible. And then he had gone on with that practice throughout his leadership, even now as a CEO. And so he also says that the Bible gives us incredible insights into the mind of God. So he's encouraging us to read the Bible, but also in general to be good readers. Our lives can change when our habits change. So most of us might resist reading. Claire has been talking to us about reading, and there's that resistance. So our lack of effort to read is actually resisting happiness, because there is happiness that can be found in reading. That's the name we have given this resistance that we find. So making the practice of reading, I don't want to ask Claire about that. because you have sounded that drum over and over again. But the action step he gives us is set aside a few minutes each day to read and reflect on a passage from the Bible. Chapter 15, falling in love with learning. Yeah. So he says, the day you fall in love with learning, your life changes forever. He also says that where you find excellence, you find continuous learning. He gave an example of when he took his child to school, when he took his eldest son to school. So he had a discussion with the teacher, and he told the teacher that, well, my interest is not that my child will be the person to read first in the class, or whether he reads last in the class. I don't care. What I want for my child is that you will instill in them the love for learning, because he believes that if our children develop a love for learning, they will become lifelong learners. So on the experience of lifelong learning, Primera, can you share something about lifelong learning?
Primera is trying to change offices.
Okay.
She's just trying to change to a better location.
Oh. Okay,
yeah.
You can say something about lifelong learning.
Yeah. For me, learning is, it's like if you don't learn, you don't grow. It's really as simple as that. That's something I've learned, that if, for example, you expect to advance in your career with the knowledge that you got as an undergrad, you can't. I don't remember half the things I learned at university. I don't. So if I'm going to do my work with that kind of knowledge, there's no way I can make a meaningful contribution. So every day I must learn. And just to give you an example of what, like some of the things I do, like the articles from Harvard Business Review. With my kind of work, I every meeting they ask you for what's your opinion about COVID-19 and its impact on businesses. Now, if you haven't read a newspaper article, if you haven't read an online article on LinkedIn, and you can't hold that conversation, you cannot. So you must go out and read, and you say, as for example, I work in media, and there's what are other media houses doing in the US, in Europe? How are they overcoming the challenges of COVID-19? If you're running a business, what are other SMEs doing to stay relevant? Is it going digital? Is it, as in, this is learning, in my opinion. It's getting new knowledge every single day, depending on what you're doing. And so I agree with Yosa that if you don't learn, you don't grow. And it has to be something that we need to teach our children, especially in our children have now been trained to learn academics, learn how to get that 4 in that A, that 4 in PLE. Beyond that, what are those life skills that our children are actually learning? And so I agree with you that these are things that we need to teach our children even at a younger age, so that they are equipped more than physics and science and chemistry. There must be more that they can learn. I'm so happy about, I think I can say this, the Girls for Girls teenage sessions. I have my 2 daughters a part of that. And last week, they had an assignment to share videos of their videos of speech, the speech. So we're supposed to get a topic and then say a speech in 2 minutes. And my daughter had a speech about in the internet and its influence on the young girls. And she talked about the dark web, that we should, I advise the girls to avoid the dark web. And I was like, the dark web? Really? What's the dark web? No, this is my teenage daughter. This is my teenage daughter. But I was glad that she was able to have a 2-minute meaningful speech. My other daughter, Angel, talked about climate change and how each one of us needs to do something towards stopping climate change. And these are teenagers, you know, and I'm so glad that through the teen class, Girls for Girls teenagers, they are learning things that are not from the classroom, you know. So I just want to encourage that even for us to make every day, you know, a learning opportunity. Thank you.
Perfect, Claire. And I wind that up with saying, wherever you find excellence, you find continuous learning. Wherever you find continuous learning is missing, you find mediocrity. So let's encourage ourselves to learn continuously, but at the same time, let's encourage our children as well to be continuous learners. So he gives some interesting verses. Also, the Bible is pushing us to learn continuously, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Think statements like these. So in chapter, I'll move on to chapter 16. Chapter 16 discusses he calls it no visitors. But in no visitors, he was sharing resistance that he had when his mentor had taken him a series of things. So all the things we have discussed, his mentor was teaching him and was taking him along a journey of learning all these lessons. We've shared them, but he had a mentor who was sort of taking him through all these lessons. And in this chapter, he invited him to visit some home of the elderly. So he asks him, what are you doing on Saturday afternoon? Like most of us, the first thought that came to him is, I'm busy. So he just pushes him to say, what are you busy doing? I just want 2 hours of your Saturday afternoon. So he recognized that was resistance. Yeah. So this thing that we've been discussing, that we are saying, give it a name. He realized that it was resistance. Imagine this is somebody who has taken you on a journey. He has taught you various things, various interesting lessons that are changing your life, but there's still that resistance of, I'm not available. So on second thought, he said, okay, let's go. So he took him to this old people's home, and there he saw old people who have not been visited for long. They are just there. And when they went in to talk to these people, he asked each of them, what would you have to say to this young man? If you were young again, what advice would you give to such a young man? So Matthew, in those early stages of his life, he was able to learn great lessons from each of these old people. And what he encouraged us to do also is to visit the lonely. Somewhere not far from your home. Take time to visit some of these people who are lonely. It will be a two-way win, both for you who is visiting, but also they have great lessons for us as young people. So he encourages us to use that chance of handling or helping people's loneliness by visiting them, but which could also end up being a message for us as we visit these people. I'm not sure if you have visited some of these lonely people and you could share some lessons. It's not a practice that I had. I know that we are always encouraged to visit the old, spend time with them. It's not something that I've practiced, but it's maybe something that another habit that I could just try to add to what I do. Have you had that experience, Claire?
For me, it was really lockdown, not being able to have the social aspect where you can't visit someone and you can see people for a long time. Now that for me was really like life-changing when you don't have the social connections, you know. And I remember there's, I think I shared it in one of the book reviews. There are those small things that people do. I remember at the beginning of the lockdown, Kristen is a mentor in Girls for Girls, sent groceries to to my home. And, you know, I was so moved. I did not need groceries, but she sent matoke, and I was moved to tears. Because this is someone who went out and bought matoke, pineapple, passion, apples, everything from the garden. She told the border man, take them to Claire. And I called, I said, no, this is a mistake. I told the border man, but kugenda walala. He said, madam, you know. And I was like, I called Kristen. I'm like, Kristen, what is this? And she said, I just thought about you and decided to send you some food. It was so life-changing for me. And I've never forgotten it. It was a nice, so what you're talking about is just the mindfulness of thinking about someone else. I'm sure it did not cost her a lot to buy this, but it was a thought. It was the thought behind the fact that she said, let me do this for someone else. So it's not really about going to prison and visiting the prisoners. You know, yeah, it's just like the example of Jesus Christ, when he talks about the end times, and he's like, you will be asked for that, who you shared the glass of water with, who you helped. And the someone was like, when did you want water? And feel to give it to you. When did you? It's like, it's your neighbors, the people around you. And many times we think it has to be something physical, you know, or we need to wait for a birthday to be able to gift someone, you know. No, it's that deliberate thing that you think about, like, how can I be a blessing to someone? Yeah, that is something that I felt like I needed to share. Sometimes it's giving of your time. Yeah, giving of your time, calling someone, saying, I've taken long without seeing you, but I just had thought about you and thought I would check in. Just that thought really, really can touch someone's heart.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Primera, are you back? Primera is not yet back. For the next chapter, I thought I would ask Primera to share her life experience. It's about unconventional education. In this section of unconventional education, he tells us that life is always teaching us lessons. Yeah, life is always teaching us lessons. Forget the lessons you learned in school, but the school of life is teaching us so much. And he also shares that the older he got, the more he realized that life was a teacher. There are many lessons that we need to learn. And with every step that you take, life also shows you what is the next necessary step that you need to take in order to fulfill your mission in life. So for most of us, we focused a lot on our formal education, but how much have we learned from the school of life? So he shares that when he was a teenager, he got most of his lessons in the classroom of silence. So we've talked a lot about silence in this book review. And he also shares he spent a lot in the school of silence, sitting with God in empty churches and quiet churches, and confirms that he's learned more from an hour of silence than he could have learned from so many books. And a lot of what he needed to do in the next phase of his life was informed through quietness and just learning from the school of life. I'll combine that with the next chapter because we need to give you a chance, Claire, to get onto your section. So next chapter is about Tuesday nights. He's using Tuesday nights, but what he's really talking about is how his mentor encouraged him to beyond the masses. He was going for Sunday masses, and that was the culture. Go for Sunday mass, go home, blah, blah, they read the things. And he encouraged him, how about trying the daily masses? Daily masses is where you have very few people in the church. It's just a few people scattered on the pews. But he encouraged him to spend time in these weekly masses and try to listen more to God during these sessions of daily mass. So he says that he did not get the whole idea of mass. Yeah, you know how we just go Sunday. He says he didn't get the idea of mass until he actually started going for that one during the week, where you have very few people and you have that level of silence and really meditation on what is being talked about. So he says there's something intimate about those daily masses that creates a new experience with God. And here he says, once you understand that God has an incredible dream for you, once you grasp that he wants you to become the best version of yourself and help others to do the same, once you start to listen to the prayers at Mass with all this in mind, you will quickly discover the value of your Christianity. So he's really pushing us to, the key point here is go for those prayers that happen during the week, besides all the drums and the merrymaking that happens when you go to the Sunday service. Try the weekly sessions, which are more quiet and more reflective, and hear what God has to say to you. Next chapter is on being bored, and it's also related to going to church and how you get bored with the way the church runs. And he says that being bored at any moment in our lives is a massive insult to God. So we should find ways to make this more interesting. He encourages us to think beyond ourselves. Whenever you feel bored, it's a sign that you're thinking more about yourself than the rest of the people around you. So the action step he pushes for us is, if you ever feel bored, look outside of yourself and see, how can I serve someone else? So being bored is a sign that you're being selfish, thinking of yourself, but look outside of yourself, see how you can serve others, and then he's certain that the boredom will die. Chapter 20 is on learning to listen. Yeah? From time to time, it's good for us to learn to listen. Listen to those you love, listen to your body, listen to your conscience, listen to your soul. This chapter was eye-opening for me because he was very explicit and very specific about how we should listen. So he gives us some examples. Look at whoever is speaking. Look. You know, the tendencies we have. Someone is speaking, but you're looking the other way, but he encourages you to look at who is speaking to you, smile and make eye contact. He says, if you're not looking when someone is speaking to you, it's an immediate signal that you're not interested. You're not interested in what they're saying, you're not paying attention, and you're bored. So for me, after reading the book, I'm being intentional about looking at the one who is talking to me. Whether it's my daughter, whether it's my son, I try to look. And also especially for my husband, because sometimes you just look the other way, you listen. So I'm now being deliberate about, if you're talking, I look at you. And I think it changes the whole way you listen. So he also said, listen with your body. Your body language says a lot about if you're doing open or closed listening. Be mindful of your body language and have an open position when you listen. So for me, these explanations of practical aspects of how to listen were very interesting for me. Don't interrupt. If someone is speaking and you interrupt, you're precisely telling the other person, I know what you're about to say, and what I am about to say is more important than what you are saying. That's when you interrupt. So avoid distractions and disruptions. Be present. Try not to be thinking about the next thing to say. Ask questions. Ask questions. Make sure you understand what the other person is saying. Asking, is this what you're trying to say? Is a powerful tool for active listening. So everyone loves to be listened to, and we are encouraged to learn to listen. So in concluding this section, he says the most practical way to improve our relationships is to continuously become better listeners. Also make a conscious effort to listen to God and people in your life. I'll just wrap up the next three so that we go to Claire. Power of habits. Yeah, we keep discussing habits. Habits is, and creating habits is an effortless way of defeating resistance. We've been discussing resisting happiness. If you create the habit of if my alarm goes off, I wake up. That habit is your way of defeating that resistance that tries to keep you in bed. So positive habits of mind and body and soul require great intentionality and persistence. That's what we are encouraged to do. Habits, good and bad, have an enormous impact on our lives, and he encourages us to write down at least 3 habits that we need to change. If we had time, we would write this down, but we need to continue. On the next chapter, How Many Sundays Left, he asks us to reflect. Yeah, if you are to look at the life expectancy in Uganda, let's say life expectancy, we're at 55, and you ask how many Sundays are left. It's just to draw you to a reflection of how much time do I have left. And he's pushing us to make the most of the time that we have left. Life is short, do not waste a day. And the last section is attempted murder. We are trying to murder the truth. We don't want to listen the truth, but in order to consistently experience the happiness and joy, God, we need to recognize what is true. We need to recognize what is bad. If it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good. Let's not murder the truth. So the key point is our culture is trying to murder the truth, where they say everything is okay, and yet you know what is okay and what is not okay. So action step, give truth a place of honor in your heart, mind, soul. And next time you catch yourself telling a lie, pause and ask yourself, what are you lying about? So I'll stop there and allow Claire to continue with your section. The last part was hungry. What are you hungry for? Whatever you're hungry for, what is the purpose of your hunger? What are you yearning for? But the ultimate spiritual awareness helps us to understand that whatever we are yearning for can be filled by God. Our hunger is a reminder that we need God. Whatever you feel you're hungering for, whatever you're yearning for, that's God telling you that you need me. So let's stop whatever you feel you're hungry for, whether it's a relationship, whether it is a marriage, whether it is closer friends, it's God speaking to you. Thank you. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Winnie. And I think for the last session, I'm just going to quickly summarize. I won't go through every chapter. I'm just going to pick out some of the highlights that I got from the last session, chapter. Now, one of the key things, that's 25, chapter 25, breaking the cycle. How do we break the cycle? He gives an example of the the father who brought a demon-possessed boy to Jesus for healing, to the disciples for healing, and they were not able to drive out the demon. And afterwards, they went to Jesus and they asked, how come we were able to drive out all the other demons, but we could not drive out this demon? And Jesus told them that some demons need praying and fasting. So there are circumstances, there's some issues that we deal with in our lives that can only be changed through prayer and fasting. They can only be changed by us recognizing what the problem is and then going out for it. And the example he gives is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. The first step for someone who is an alcoholic is to actually accept that there is a problem. And so the quote in there says, we are all struggling with something. Identify your something, name it, and own it. And so that is the first step, so to breaking the cycle. And when you look, one of the things I loved about this book is it encourages self-evaluation. Yeah, it encourages you to do a self-audit, an audit of your life. What is that one thing that you're struggling with? You must accept that there's a problem in order for you to overcome. And then the next chapter, he talks about you cannot succeed at anything without. Now, when you post, it talks about gratification. If there is no delayed gratification, you will not get the rewards. There is a direct link. The ability to delay gratification is intimately linked to success. And they gave an experiment of that was carried out of children who were given chocolate and cookies. And they told them that, you know what, wait a few minutes, you'll be able to eat. And they left the room. Now there's some children who looked at the cookie, could not actually wait for the minutes and ended up eating it. And then others carefully, painfully looked at the cookie until the minutes elapsed. What happened? They actually tracked the behavior of those two groups, the children who ate the cookie immediately and those that delayed and ate it later. And the research shows that the kids who delayed eating are those kids that were successful in life, And so here they talk about some of the things that we do. For example, we are hungry now, we want to eat now, we have to, every lunch, our brain is switched on, I have to eat. If I don't eat, I die, and yet you will not die. And so it talks about that experiment and relates it to spiritual obesity. I had never heard of that. Winnie, had you heard of spiritual obesity?
No, never heard of the term.
Yeah, so in this chapter, it talks about spiritual obesity. Now we need to evaluate our lives. Yeah, there are issues. For example, am I spiritually obese? I have to now I have to go into a spiritual fitness. Yeah, if I need to cut my weight physically, what about in the things of the spirit? Yeah. Are you spiritually conscious of the things that you're filling your mind with? You know, sometimes I see status and you see all these kind of TikTok videos of all kinds of, and you're like, what are we filling ourselves with? There's so much information, yeah, that is making us spiritually, you know, obese. We need to start getting the right exercise, the right habits in order for us to be spiritually fit. And some of the things that he shares is about reading the word of God, praying and being very conscious and being very grateful with the things. These are practices that will help us deal with our spiritual obesity. And then resistance hates discipline, it has self-control. And that is one of the highlights. And then there's this, I think it's 27, chapter 27 talks about the secret to excellence, and gives an example of his, in their family, they were a sports family. They were always in sports games. And his father, every time we dropped him off for a football game or any other game, he always told him, the last words he always told him, listen to the coach. Listen to the coach. And he asked his dad, but why is it that you always tell me to listen to the coach? And the father's response is very, very interesting. He says, because nobody achieves excellence at anything without coaching. I found that statement really amazing. You know, nobody achieves excellence at anything without coaching. Seek out a spiritual coach. And that is something that we don't take coaching seriously. Because you're good at football, you're skilled, you're fit, even with all these things. I think that's a conversation that happened last week when people were arguing over why the Man U coach was fired, what. Really, because players have failed to score, doesn't mean you fire a coach. But it's in sports, it's actually very important. It's very important. The role of a coach really determines the direction for the team. And because most people are saying, but the players like Ronaldo on that team and all this, I'm not a football fan, but that conversation was there in office. So I was listening in, and they're saying they didn't need to fight. Maybe the players are exhausted. The players are old, all that. But it goes to show the role of a coach. The role of a coach. And so if we're going through life without any single coach, then we cannot actually excel. And then on 28, it's the light is on. Now this is talking about what I mentioned at the beginning, procrastination, postponing, and gives an example of our cars. When you decide to carry a new magazine every time you're going to visit a doctor, and then you put it in the back, and then every time you're at he gave an example of a fast food restaurant. You go get food, put it in the back of the car, every single time. Before you know it, you have a car and the back seat is full of junk. And that is how we are with life. If you decide not to pick up after yourself, you'll find that everything is in a mess. Now, in my other life, of home organizing, you find that really that is it. There's a cup in the children's room, there are clothes on a chair, there are clothes on the floor. It's not because the person is a mess. It's because they have postponed putting that cloth where it's supposed to be, and it creates clutter. And so he gives the same example with our lives. We need to be very mindful. Yeah, we need to be very mindful, and talks about we all need to be liberated from our self-centeredness. The root of all our problems is selfishness. Yeah, we need to start thinking about this behavior, this thing I'm doing, how is it going to affect someone else in order for us to solve an issue. I'm just jumping, but I cannot end without mentioning I think one of my favorite chapters in this book. chapter 29. Are you a pilgrim or a tourist? That was a great question. Are you a pilgrim or a tourist? Now, there are two people who go to Israel. There are people who go as tourists, and then there are people who go as pilgrims. There are two things. A tourist will be in selfies, will be, telling people, this is where Jesus walked. Look, I've reached here, I've reached the Jerusalem wall. But a pilgrim will be conscious of the fact that they are walking where the Messiah walked. They're standing where Jesus was born. They are conscious of the fact that they are walking through history. Now, he's encouraging us that in this life, find out, are you a tourist or are you a pilgrim? That calls for consciousness of your experience. Whether we want it or not, you are happening. Your life is happening. So you make a decision that whether you're going to take selfies and you're going to be a pilgrim, or you're going to enjoy and breathe in the fact that you are in that place, you are here. And it talks about the fact that we are here only for a time. When someone pays all the money, all their savings and goes to Israel for a pilgrim, they realize they're not there forever. You have a week, you have 4 days, and that's life. We are here on earth for a moment. When I leave this world, I need people to say, my life was changed because Claire passed this way. And that has to be a testimony for everyone. Someone has to be able to stand up and say, because I was in touch with this person, because I met this person, my life was not the same. And so let's examine ourselves. Are we tourists or are we actually pilgrims? Either way, our lives are a journey. And then, of course, there are quite a number of chapters, but we're already 5 minutes over. Let me just mention two. One, chapter 30. It's about the first intervention. Now, there's a question here. Have you ever really had a plan for your spiritual health and growth? In our lives, we meet different people. Yeah. When we meet different people, all of them are actually supposed to teach us something. That crazy friend, that unreasonable boss, that lousy, I do not know what, all the people we meet, there's a reason they're in our lives. They give a list here that some people we meet are messengers. Winnie, did you know that some people are messengers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some
Yeah,
people are messengers. Yes. Some people are teachers. Some people are healers. Other people are coaches. And other people are counselors. So when people meet you, who do they meet? And the people you meet, I need to be able to say, this person, Kathy or Brenda or Barbara, this person has been a coach to me. This person has been a messenger. This person has been a healer. There are times when you meet someone at the right time and they say the very things that you needed to hear. And yet you read the same Bible, but they come in just for that moment to tell you, I have been there and I made it. Take courage. So in our lives, we need to learn that all the people that we meet are there for a reason. If you're not conscious of your presence, you're going to miss the message that the messenger was supposed to give you. But when you listen consciously, And you're like, that makes sense. That's the answer I've been looking for. So in our lives, he encourages us to listen and be conscious of the people we meet, because all of them are serving a purpose. And then the last one is about being blessed and grateful. It encourages us to live for a mission, understand that there has to be a purpose to your life. You're not here by accident. Find that purpose. Let your light shine. Are you actually letting your light shine? Yeah. Let us let our light shine wherever we are. Let people be better because they met us. Let us, the things that we know, whether it's in your career or in your family, it doesn't matter what like the background, let your light shine everywhere you are. And then also it talks about when God looks at your resume. That one's a good one. What does God see when they look at your resume? Yeah, it was encouraging us to, and I actually gave out this book for that one statement. Helped me give this book to someone else, and I knew that they just needed to realize that God would actually, when God looks at the resume, what would they see? When we need to be able to give God our time. We need to be able to give God our time. Let us not be too busy with 70% this or our experience is this. When God looks at your resume, what will he see? These accomplishments that you have, they don't make any sense if God is at zero. So let us be very conscious about that, and then be blessed and grateful every single day. Be grateful. Look out for the things to be thankful for. And the last chapter is about never get discouraged. Never get discouraged. COVID-19 has really had a lot of impact on our lives. Sometimes we think that, the worst is yet, is over. But when you pass Nakasero Hospital and you find that there's no, you can't even pass because there are many cars on the side. All those cars represent patients that are in Nakasero Hospital, and you're not there, and you don't have a patient there. It means you need to be grateful. You need to be grateful that you have the opportunity to sit in a book club like this and get some kind of knowledge and wisdom. And so every day we need to look out for those things that God has blessed us with. Thank you. Thank you so much. I had to run through through everything, but Primera, I hope you're back and I hope you'll be able to see us all. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been lovely listening in the whole time. Thank you so much. I learned a lot about this book, and I think all the books in 2021 have been very life-changing for me. And there's someone who asked us and Claire and said, do you guys just plan to pick these books out? And I'm like, not really. It just happens that we feel a great pull towards these books, and as we pick them out and ask other people to help us pick the books out. So thank you so much, Claire and Winnie, for today. Now, next week, we are going to have another session for the November book, for the December, so November book. And then we shall have January for the December book. So we're going to give you some time in December to get to read the book. It's also a very, very nice book. The reason why I played the first song, I played the song today. So next weekend, we're going to have, on Friday, we're still going to be here. We're going to go through the book for November, plus all the books that we've gone through the year. So in case you missed any book, we will try within the 2 hours to be able, and let's make it through next week. Yeah. Try to go through all the books and all our lessons in the book. And we are going to have everybody, all the people behind the book club coming through to be able to, even the faces you have not seen in a while, through to see, to share their learnings from the year. We hope to see you. In case you want to be part of it, please inbox us. We are available and we are so happy to get you guys to get involved and come and do presentations and be part of us as we present. So, we are excited for next week. I'm excited to come and look through all the books for the year since January. Yeah, thank you so much, Claire. Thank you so much, Winnie.
Thank you, Primera.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would encourage maybe Primera, can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone who is on this call to read our last book, Very Good Lives. I actually shared the video. It looks, it's just based on a speech, but it has so many insightful things in the